Linda, you really don't have to come. This party's for important people. I froze right there in the middle of my own backyard, watching my son Michael host a housewarming party at the home I'd paid 80% down on. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. Yet somehow I wasn't invited. My daughter-in-law Rachel said it straight to my face, in front of her whole family. Laughter floated from the deck where everyone clinked champagne glasses, chatting and posing for photos, while I stood below like a stranger who'd wandered onto the wrong property. Her words echoed in my head, a party for important people. That night I started forming a plan no one would see coming. As I walked out of the yard still holding the little gift bag I'd brought, just in case they asked me to stay for dinner, I kept quiet. One of Rachel's relatives glanced my way, drink in hand, then turned back to his conversation, pretending not to know me. I got into my car, buckled up, and sat there for a few minutes. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. But I'd imagined this moment for years. Not the humiliation but the clarity that would follow. Driving home I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need music to drown out the noise in my head. I just listened to the hum of the engine and the steady roll of the tires, reminding myself that I still controlled something. I had pictured this housewarming so many times. In my version I'd arrive early, help Rachel set up the tables like always. I'd bring that special salad Michael had loved since he was little. She'd give me a polite hug, I'd tell myself at least she still remembers me, and we'd all take a family photo under the big oak tree in the backyard, the one I planted myself 3 years ago after selling my old home to help them buy this one. But none of that happened. I wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't in the family anymore. When I got home I tossed my purse onto the chair and didn't bother turning on the lights. The soft orange glow of the setting Sunday sun filled the house. I sank into my armchair in the corner where I usually read or do a little embroidery and just stared out the window. I didn't cry, not a single tear. I think I'd already cried myself dry, like all those times before when Rachel told me I called too often, that I was wearing her out. When Michael started replying to my texts with emojis instead of words. When I sent money to help fix the car and the only reply I got was a "transfer successful" notification. I'm not someone who angers easily. I don't hold grudges either. But there's a kind of wound that never heals. Not because it's too deep but because the person who caused it keeps scratching at it every day with indifference. I stood up and walked into my little home office. Against the wall sat my old dark brown filing cabinet. The one where I keep everything. Utility bills, letters from the 80s, receipts from my accounting days. I pulled out a folder labeled Family, Michael and Rachel. I'd even marked it with a pink sticky tab. Carefully, almost like I was preparing a report for a company I loved, I flipped through each page. A home repair bill, $2,800. Spanish lessons for my granddaughter Emma, $1,200. A sofa set from Michael's old apartment, $1,700. The bank loan I co-signed, $15,000. And that was only what I had on paper. There were all the quick transfers, the cash I handed over just to help them get through the month. The birthday gifts I bought for Rachel so Michael wouldn't feel awkward. None of that existed in any ledger, only in my memory and in what was left of my pride. I closed the folder. Something clicked inside me. I took out a blank notebook and started writing. Every expense, the date, the reason, who asked, how I reacted. Each line I wrote felt like popping another illusion. The illusion that I'd been the perfect mother, the devoted grandmother, the sweet mother-in-law. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the front porch. The night air was cool, the autumn breeze gentle. Yellow leaves drifted by, free and uninvited. I thought of Robert, my late husband. If he were still alive, he'd be furious, but then he'd probably smile and say, "Linda, it's time you lived for yourself." I took a sip. The faint bitterness touched my tongue, but I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt calm. That night, I didn't turn on the TV or scroll through Facebook to see photos from the party. I just lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling, and asked myself, if I stop paying, will I still be called Mom? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I was about to find out. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The autumn sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting the room a soft gold. I lay there a while, feeling like my body had been through a storm, but my mind was strangely steady. I went to the kitchen, brewed a pot of black coffee, and watched the steam curl into the quiet air. The smell brought me back to younger mornings, rushing to my accounting job, coffee in hand, feeling purposeful. Maybe that's why I've always kept every bill, every document neatly filed away. That habit, the one people used to tease me for, suddenly became my anchor. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and started downloading statements. The numbers appeared cold and exact. February last year, $1,200 to Michael for a car deposit. May, $3,000 to Rachel for new salon equipment. November, $850 for Emma's winter tuition, the granddaughter I've never held because Rachel says she doesn't like the smell of ointment on old people. Each amount carried a memory. Michael's worried voice one night. "Mom, my car's dead. I can't get to work without one." I'd gone to the bank right away. The word need always moved me. Or Rachel sitting across from me at a cafe, eyes shining. "Mom, if I don't invest more, the salon will close." I'd emptied my emergency savings and handed it over. I thought I was saving a family. I kept scrolling. The numbers rolled on, steady and cold. I picked up my notebook again and began logging. This month, $2,000. Next month, $1,500. Another urgent $4,000. As my pen moved, my hand trembled, not from age but from anger. For years I'd turned myself into an ATM with feelings. I took a long breath and totaled it all up. The final number glared back at me, $47,600. $47,600. And not a penny of it could buy respect. That was what I'd given in 5 years. Not even counting the cash slipped into envelopes, the gifts, or the times I quietly paid their electric and water bills. $47,600. I stared at the number over and over again, like it was a sentence being handed down over my head. I got up and started pacing the living room. My eyes landed on an old photo on the wall. Michael's high school graduation. Robert and I were on either side of him, Michael in the middle, blue gown, diploma in hand, his smile shining like a future we'd all sacrificed for. I could almost hear Robert whisper in my ear, "See, every hardship was worth it." If he were alive now, what would he think seeing our only son treat me like an outsider? I sat back down at the table and looked at the notebook. The numbers lay there in straight rows, like witnesses lined up in court, and not one of them could be cross-examined. For the first time, I wasn't seeing them through a mother's eyes but through an accountant's. Clear, transparent, absurd. My phone buzzed and I flinched. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. A text followed right after. "Mom, just checking on your health. Call me when you're free." I laughed out loud. All these years, Rachel had never called just to check on me. There was always something under it. Rent, credit cards, tuition, new equipment. Checking on your health was a thin curtain over a bottomless hole. I didn't call back. I closed the laptop, folded the notebook, and put it in the drawer. But in my head, the number kept echoing. $47,600. That afternoon, I went to the local Cleveland Heights market. I carried a small basket and picked up a few things: milk, eggs, bread, some greens. The total was under $30. I paid, tucked the receipt into my wallet, and suddenly found it almost funny. I'm the kind of person who keeps a receipt for eggs, yet I'd let tens of thousands slip away without ever asking for a thank you. Back home, I put the groceries away and sat in the armchair. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt angry. Angry at my own lenience. Angry that I'd let motherly love be turned into a one-way contract. I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages. From Michael: "Mom, we're in a bind. Can you loan me some money?" From Rachel: "Mom, rent's late this week. Can you help?" Every single one was the same, short, direct, no small talk. Reading them, I felt like a customer service rep on call to fix their issues. That night, I opened the notebook again and wrote one last line at the bottom. "I'm not a mother anymore. I'm the family bank. And starting today, this bank is closed." When I shut the notebook, I felt a new current move through my chest. Lighter but colder. I knew the next step wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I'd crossed the hardest threshold. I turned off the living room lights and headed to my bedroom. In the dark, I heard the wind whistle past the window. I pulled up the covers and closed my eyes. No longer a mother waiting for a thank you text. I slept like a soldier, ready for a new fight. The next morning I went to the bank. The room was wide and bright, sunlight pouring through big panes of glass onto the glossy tile floor. I'd sat here dozens of times before, but this time everything was different. No more rushing to sign transfers for Michael. No more scanning my balance to make it work. Today I came to end it. Ryan, the longtime account manager, smiled when he saw me. He knew me well enough not to need an appointment reminder to guess why I was there. But when I sat down and set my thick notebook on the desk, his smile faltered. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman," he said in that warm baritone. "How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath. "Ryan, I want to cancel all automatic transfers to Michael and Rachel. And I want to set up a new account that no one knows about but me." He looked up at me, eyes bright with surprise but not shock, as though he'd expected this moment. "Are you sure? 5 straight years, those transfers have been like clockwork. You've never missed one." I gave a small dry smile. "That's exactly why I'm here today." Ryan typed quickly, the screen glowing. He printed out a thick stack of papers and slid them over. "These are the statements for the past 5 years. Do you want to look them over one last time?" I opened them. The numbers lined up cold and impersonal. Each amount stared back at me like an indictment. $1,200, $3,000, $850, $4,000. An endless list. I ran my hand over the page, not to reread but to feel it. This was the evidence, the answer to every sleepless night I'd spent asking where I went wrong. I wasn't wrong to love, but I was wrong to turn love into an endless financial duty. "Ryan," I said softly, "do you remember when I rushed in to withdraw $5,000 for Michael? You asked if I was sure and I laughed and said it was for family." He nodded. "I remember. I worried about you then, but you seemed determined." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Today I'm more determined, but this time it's for me." I signed the cancellation form. My hand was steady, not shaking. Ryan closed the file and carefully slid it into a plastic folder. "All set, Mrs. Whitman. From now on, no one can touch your accounts unless you agree. I also opened a new savings account for you and only you know the password. I strongly recommend you don't share it with anyone, including family." I smiled. "Don't worry. I've learned a very expensive lesson." When I stepped out of the bank, the sun hit the pavement head-on. I felt like I'd just put down a burden so heavy that my shoulders suddenly felt light. All these years, every visit here meant watching my balance drain. Today I walked out believing my money truly belonged to me. That afternoon my phone rang non-stop. First it was Michael. I let it ring. Then Rachel called. I stayed silent. After that, a stream of texts popped up. "Mom, I don't see the transfer. Did you forget? Mom, we need money for the credit card bill this week. Text me back. Mom, please don't do this to us. You know we rely on you." I read each line but didn't answer. For the first time I let the phone fall quiet. No explanations, no excuses, no promises. That evening I took out the statements and read them again like a little farewell ritual. I drew a red line through each item and whispered, "Enough. No more." It felt like unhooking one chain after another that had bound me for years. I remembered the time I paid for a new air conditioner for their apartment. Rachel said, "You're so kind. Without you we wouldn't know what to do." Those sweet words once made me feel proud. Now I saw them for what they were, a way to tie me to an endless loop. Every time they praised my generosity they were really hinting for more, and I foolishly mistook that for love. That night I sat by the living room window watching the streetlights spill in. I wrote one last line in my notebook. "The Bank of Linda Whitman is officially closed, permanently." I closed the notebook and set it on the table. This time I wasn't writing just for myself but for the future. If I ever feel weak, I'll open it and read those cold numbers to remember how many years, how much money, and how much trust one poured into one-sided love. When the clock hit 10, I switched off every light. The house went quiet, but inside me there was no emptiness anymore, only resolve. I didn't know how Michael and Rachel would react the next day when they realized the money had stopped flowing into their pockets. But I knew one thing for sure. I was ready for the fight. And this time I wouldn't back down. The next morning I just poured a cup of coffee when the phone rang. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I stared at it without rushing to answer. The ringing dragged on like someone pounding on the door of my small house. Finally I picked up. Her voice was tearful. "Mom, the credit card got declined. The house is about to be foreclosed. We thought you forgot the transfer." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the heat spread across the roof of my mouth, and answered calmly. I didn't forget, Rachel. I'm choosing not to send it anymore. There was a few seconds of silence before she burst out. You can't do that. We rely on you. You know that. I ended the call. I didn't need to hear more. My hand still rested lightly on the mug. My heartbeat stayed strangely calm. Not even 10 minutes later, Michael called. His voice wasn't soft like Rachel's. It was blunt and harsh. Mom, what's going on? I just checked the account. No money came in. You know we have a loan payment due this week, right? I closed my eyes and pictured his little face from years ago, when he'd throw his arms around my neck after being picked on at school. Now that accusing tone had no warmth at all. I said simply, I know. And I've decided to stop. He shouted, What's wrong with you? Who's gotten in your head? Don't let people feed you weird ideas. I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then hung up. The phone kept buzzing after that, but I ignored it. In the afternoon, I opened the windows and let the cool air in. I heard footsteps on the porch. Looking out, I saw Rachel standing there, hair a mess, eyes red. She hurried over and clutched my arm. Mom, please don't do this. If we lose the house, Emma will have to switch schools. She's still little. She needs stability. You're her grandma. Don't you think about her? For a brief moment, my heart pinched at my granddaughter's name. But then I remembered that for years I hadn't been allowed to hold her even once. Rachel always had an excuse. She's sleeping. She's studying. She's worried about germs. I pulled my arm free and spoke low but firm. Rachel, I've thought about Emma more than anyone, but what you're saying isn't about her. It's about the money you want me to keep paying. Her face shifted. Anger flashed in her eyes. The tears dried up instantly. She spun around and strode toward the car, tossing back, You'll regret this. I stood there watching the car leave the driveway. I didn't feel shaky, just a new sensation. Self-possession. That night, I wrote a line in my notebook. Today, for the first time in years, I wasn't bullied by tears or scolding. I closed the notebook and smiled to myself. The next day, Michael showed up. He didn't knock. He just stood blocking the walkway, jaw tight. Mom, we need to talk. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway between two worlds. The home I protect inside, and outside the son who treats me like a wallet. He glared at me. We can't live without your support. I'm working hard. Rachel is too. You know how expensive everything is now. I cut in, You're 35, Michael. At your age, your father supported a whole family and bought our first house without help. You're still leaning on your elderly mother. He frowned, voice stiffening. You make it sound like we've never cared about you. You think all we care about is money? I answered softly, each word heavy as stone. Tell me, when was the last time you called just to ask how I'm doing? Michael went silent, lips pressed tight, eyes looking away. I knew he had no answer. Finally, he left without a goodbye. I closed the door. The bitterness was there, but I didn't collapse. With every refusal, I was pulling myself a little farther out of the chains. For the next 3 days, my phone almost never stopped ringing. When no one picked up, they left messages. It was the same themes over and over. Rent, credit card debt, bank loans. I read them but didn't reply. Instead, I took a walk around the neighborhood. I stopped by Greenfield Bakery and bought a warm loaf of bread as a treat. The clerk greeted me with a friendly smile and asked which jam I liked. I felt a sudden pang. How long had it been since I'd had a simple conversation not about money? I brought the bread home, ate it alone at the kitchen table, savoring each bite and thinking, maybe this is what freedom really feels like. That night, a long text came in from Rachel. Mom, I'm sorry if I said anything that upset you, but we're really in a tough spot. If you don't help, we'll lose everything. I know you don't want your granddaughter to suffer. I read it over and over. The wording sounded gentle, but I recognized the familiar scent of manipulation. They weren't asking out of love. They were demanding out of fear of losing their only source of money. I set the phone down without replying. In the past, I told myself, a message like this would have sent me running to the bank. Now I just feel relieved that I've learned to stand firm. On Sunday morning, I got up early and went to church. I'd gone regularly for years, but my mind was always tangled with my kids' money issues. Today I sat still and listened to the sermon on forgiveness. The pastor said, forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. Forgiveness is when you let the burden fall off your shoulders and free your soul. I sat there with tears streaming, unable to stop. Not for Michael or Rachel. For myself, the woman who'd let motherhood become chains for so many years. That afternoon Rachel called again. Her voice wasn't soft this time. It was sharp. If you don't send money, we'll have to take action. Don't blame us. I pressed end. My heart didn't flutter like before. I knew things would get uglier from here, but I also knew I was ready. I thought after Rachel's vague threats, they'd quiet down and find another way. They didn't. Just 2 days later, when I came back from the grocery store and lifted the garage door, Michael's gray pickup was parked right out front. Rachel stood next to it, arms crossed, eyes like steel. I stopped and left the bags in the car. I wasn't going to start the show before I even stepped inside. Michael stepped forward, voice tight. Mom, we need a serious talk. I looked at him without a word. Rachel cut in. You're hurting this family if you don't keep helping. Emma will suffer. Do you want your granddaughter growing up in hardship? I drew a long breath. Emma again, the familiar shield they used to stab my conscience. I slipped my keys into my pocket and said, if you truly care about Emma, learn to support your own family. A grandma can't raise a child for its parents. Michael's face twisted. He moved closer, voice low but boiling. You're selfish. My whole life you preached sacrifice for family, and now you're turning your back. That's what Michael threw at me. I met his eyes. No, Michael. I sacrificed for years and you never valued it. From now on, I'm simply not sacrificing anymore. Rachel shot him a look, then slid into that syrupy tone that always sounded fake. Mom, maybe someone's been influencing you or you're confused. Think again. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. We just want you to be happy. I let out a rough laugh that even startled me. Happy? For years you took every dollar, every hour of sleep, every small joy I had. If that's love, then my happiness must be dirt cheap. Rachel went pale. The sugar coating vanished. Fine, she hissed. If this is your choice, you'll face the consequences. Michael tugged her toward the truck. Before getting in, he turned and gave me a look that wasn't a son's. It was a stranger's. You'll regret this. The gray pickup rumbled off, leaving a thin stripe of dust on the road. I stood there with my fists clenched. I knew those weren't just angry words. They were a warning. That afternoon I opened my notebook again and wrote. Today their true faces showed. No more circling. No more masks. They've made me the enemy. When I closed it, my heart still felt heavy. I had braced myself for anger and blame, but I never imagined my own son could look at me with eyes that cold. The next day after church, the pastor walked over and asked gently, Linda, are you all right? You looked deep in thought. I hesitated, then gave him the short version. He nodded, sadness in his eyes. Family, when blinded by money, can be crueler than strangers. Don't leave yourself alone. Seek support and protection. His words echoed in my head all the way home. The gentle phase was over. I needed to be ready for heavier blows. That afternoon I found an envelope in the mail. My name was written clearly, but the handwriting was messy. Inside was a printed ultimatum. If you don't continue financial support, we will be forced to pursue legal measures to protect the family's interests. Underneath were Michael's and Rachel's signatures. I sat there stunned, the paper trembling in my hand. The threats had become a document. This wasn't just tears or scolding anymore. This was a scheme. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room under the warm glow of the table lamp while memories unspooled. Michael's graduation, his wedding to Rachel, the day I handed over money for their apartment, the nights I stayed up juggling their debts. It all reduced to a painful truth. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was a mobile bank. And when the bank closed, they treated me like a traitor. Still, threaded through the pain was a small ray of light. The truth had finally surfaced. No more illusions. No more faint hope my love would be returned. Harsh as it was, that truth set me free. The next day I called my old attorney, Mr. Carter, the one who helped with my will when Robert was alive. I told him about the letter. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Linda, this is serious. Gather everything, bank statements, texts, letters. We'll prepare for the worst-case scenario. I nodded, heart thudding. I wasn't standing vaguely on defense anymore. I had stepped into a real battle. Early evening, while I was sorting papers, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the curtain. Michael and Rachel again. This time I didn't answer. I stood behind the fabric, breathing slow. They knocked, called my name, then started shouting when I didn't respond. Rachel yelled, "Mom, if you don't come out, we'll record a video and send it to everyone to show you're abandoning your kids and your grandchild." I stayed still, my heart aching, but I didn't move. After nearly 10 minutes, they left, stamping muddy prints into the lawn. I sank into a chair and covered my face. The hurt flooded in, but inside it rose a strange pride. I hadn't opened the door. I hadn't caved. That night I added another line to my notebook. "When they stop hiding, I see everything clearly. Their eyes, their tone. Every word is a knife. I'd rather face a real blade than live forever in fake sweetness." I closed the notebook and let out a long breath. I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I pulled back the curtains and saw a familiar figure across the street, watering her flowers. Marjorie, my neighbor of more than 10 years. We'd never been close. A hello at church, a nod at the grocery store, that was all. But today the way she looked over felt like a question. I forced a smile and waved. She shut off the hose, crossed the street, and paused at my fence. Silver hair, steady hands, eyes that didn't miss much. "Linda, I heard a commotion yesterday. Is everything all right?" Her voice was gentle, truly concerned. I froze. I hadn't planned to share any of this. But the clarity in her gaze loosened something in me. I opened the gate and led her to the porch. We sat on the old wooden bench as the morning light filtered through the leaves, laying little gold patches across the table. Slowly I told her everything. Being shut out of the celebration, canceling the transfers, the shouting at my door, the threatening letter. Marjorie listened without interrupting, just nodding along. When I finished, she took my hand, warm, steady. "Linda, you're not alone. I've been through the same thing. My son tried to have me declared incapacitated to take this house. I know what it's like to be seen as a wallet by your own blood." My chest tightened. Someone understood this pain. She told me that 5 years ago her son and daughter-in-law pressured her relentlessly, kept borrowing for a restaurant, then blamed her when it failed. It escalated to hiring a lawyer and filing for guardianship. She found a strong attorney and neighbors willing to testify. She won. After that, she learned how to build fences, even with her own child. "How did you get through it?" I asked. "Didn't you feel guilty?" She looked me straight in the eye, resolute. "Of course. I cried until I couldn't breathe. But being a mother doesn't mean financing your kids for life. They grow up, start families, and have to stand on their own feet. Love doesn't mean unlimited money." Her words rang through me like a bell. I saw how far I'd traveled down the road of sacrifice. So far I'd forgotten where it should end. We sat for a while longer. Then Marjorie offered, "If you need it, I'll testify for you. I've seen Michael and Rachel show up and raise their voices at you many times. The neighborhood knows too. Don't be afraid. You have witnesses." Tears pricked my eyes as I squeezed her hand. "Marjorie, you're a lifesaver. I never imagined I'd find an ally right across the street." Marjorie smiled kindly. "We're mothers, Linda. And sometimes, mothers need to remind each other that we deserve protection too." That evening I went home and opened my files again. All the bank statements, all the evidence I kept tucked away. But this time, those cold numbers weren't just proof of my foolishness. I saw them like bullets, and Marjorie had just placed a shield in my hands. I began sorting everything neatly, dating, clipping in the text messages, printing out emails. My hands moved faster and faster, and with every page a calm certainty rose in me. I'm not alone anymore. 2 days later, Michael showed up again. Through the window I saw him standing beside Rachel, and this time there was a man I didn't recognize. I didn't open the door. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Marjorie. "I'll be right over. Stay calm, Linda," she said. When she arrived, the trio outside looked startled. Michael tried to keep his voice even. "Mom, this is our legal advisor. He just wants to talk to find a solution for everyone." I stayed behind the locked door and didn't answer. Then from beside me Marjorie spoke, her voice clear and sharp. "I'm the neighbor. I've witnessed enough disturbances here. If you keep harassing her, I'll call the police immediately." The air changed instantly. Rachel tugged Michael's arm. "Let's go. Standing here is pointless." When they finally drove off, I let out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling. Marjorie laid a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "See? Sometimes just one witness is enough to stop them from crossing the line." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. I dreamed I was walking through a bright garden, surrounded by the laughter of older women. I knew what it meant. The strength of community, the kind of support Marjorie had opened up for me. The next morning I baked a pie and took it over to her house. She opened the door, surprised. "Linda, you didn't have to." I smiled. "It's not about courtesy. I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I finally feel peace again in my own home." We sat together eating pie, sipping tea, talking like old friends. I told her about the good memories buried under years of financial strain. Saying them out loud felt like release. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Today I gained an ally. Marjorie, the woman who understands a pain I thought only I carried." Maybe this journey isn't just about protecting assets. Maybe it's about learning to stand with other women, stronger, together. After that day when Marjorie stood up for me against Michael and Rachel, I could finally breathe easier. But deep down I knew their silence wouldn't last. It was just a calm lake with currents swirling underneath. Sure enough, a few days later another letter arrived. This time, not in Michael's messy handwriting but a clean printout bearing a law firm's seal. It claimed I was showing signs of mental instability and might need supervision to prevent financial risk. It also mentioned the legal rights of direct heirs. Plainly put, they were building a case to drag me into court, to take control of my finances. When I finished reading, a chill ran through me. But instead of panicking, I folded the letter neatly and set it on the table. Then I called Mr. Carter, my longtime attorney. "I need you to look at this," I said. An hour later he was at my door. After reading it, he frowned. "They're using the classic playbook, Linda. I've seen this too many times. They're trying to paint you as a paranoid elder who can't handle her own affairs. We'll need to get ahead of it. What do you suggest?" I asked quietly. "We'll arrange an independent assessment," he said. "I know doctors and specialists who can evaluate you, people I trust. Their report will prove your capacity and shut this down before it grows legs. In court they'll be your wall." I exhaled slowly. For the first time in months I didn't feel alone in the dark. 2 days later I met with the psychologist and internist Mr. Carter had arranged. The evaluation took place in a bright office filled with natural light streaming through big windows. Dr. Moore, a calm woman with round glasses, asked me question after question. Dates, figures, problem solving. I answered clearly. When she asked me to total the money I'd given my son and his wife, I replied without hesitation, $47,600 over 5 years. The number was carved into me like a mark on stone. When we finished, she smiled warmly. "Mrs. Whitman, your mind is sharper than many younger people I see. I'll write a full report. No one will be able to twist this truth." Hearing that, my eyes stung. Not because I doubted myself, but because someone outside had finally seen me for what I was. A completely lucid woman who had simply been exploited for too long. As we left the clinic, Mr. Carter said quietly, "We've just landed our first counterpunch. But brace yourself. Michael and Rachel won't stop here. They'll use every trick in the book to wear you down. Stay firm." I nodded. My heart was heavy but steady. Sure enough, that night my phone rang non-stop. But this time it wasn't yelling. It was messages dripping with sweetened words. Rachel wrote, "Mom, do you remember holding Emma during her naps? He keeps asking for Grandma. She cried when she heard you're upset with us. Please don't turn your back on the family." I bit my lip. I knew Emma was too little to understand any of this. That message wasn't her voice. It was a ploy Rachel had crafted. Then came a text from Michael. "Mom, I drove past your house. The lights were on but you didn't open the door. I know you saw me. I don't want us to be strangers. I regret so much." I sat by the window watching the streetlights spill over the quiet sidewalk. A part of me wanted to open the door to believe him. But then I remembered the bank statements, and that cold look in his eyes when he said, "You'll regret this." I knew better now. The next day I told Marjorie everything. She sat across from me, sipped her tea and gave a small, knowing smile. "They're trying everything, Linda. One minute it's threats, the next it's sweetness. That's classic psychological warfare. Make you waver until you can't tell what's real. But remember, the truth is what you've seen with your own eyes, not what they type in a text." I nodded, feeling my balance return. "Keep every text, every email, every letter," she added. "Each line is evidence of manipulation. Don't delete anything." I did exactly that. I printed every message and filed them away. Each page felt like a puzzle piece revealing the full picture. That afternoon my phone rang again, an unknown number. The voice on the line said they were a social worker and had received a report that I was showing signs of confusion and needed a safety check. I went cold. Clearly, Michael and Rachel had filed the report. I stayed calm. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I won't answer any questions without my attorney present." The caller hesitated, then hung up. I called Mr. Carter immediately and told him what happened. "Good," he said. "You did exactly the right thing. This is their reverse psychology move, trying to twist your caution into proof that you're paranoid. But now we have the assessment and witnesses. Don't be afraid." For the first time I felt that truth settle deep inside me. Fear no longer ran my life. Hearing Mr. Carter say that, I felt like I'd just stepped out of a trap. That night I sat on the porch as the cool breeze ran through my hair. Marjorie came over carrying a small basket of fresh pastries she'd baked that afternoon. We ate and talked as the sun faded. "Linda," she said softly, "I used to be scared like you. But I realized every time they tried to manipulate me I just gained more evidence against them. Let them perform, we'll record it. When you're in court the truth will speak for itself." For the first time in months I smiled. And it wasn't shaky or forced. I suddenly understood that instead of being hunted, I could become the witness for my own truth. Before bed I wrote in my journal, "They think they're cornering me, but their mind games only reveal who they really are. I'm not swayed anymore. I have evidence, allies, and faith." When I closed the notebook and laid my head on the pillow, sleep came easily, not because the storm had passed but because I'd learned how to stand steady inside it. Just 1 week after that call from the social worker, a thick envelope arrived, stamped with the seal of the local court. My stomach dropped as I tore it open. Inside was a petition to verify civil competency against me. Right there in the first line my name, Linda Whitman, was in quotation marks as if I were a character in someone else's story. The plaintiffs, Michael Whitman and Rachel Whitman. I read it again and again, my chest tightening. The claims were outrageous. They said Mrs. Whitman has recently spent money irrationally on useless items, that she isolates herself and shows signs of depression and paranoia toward family, and that there's a risk of outsiders manipulating her assets. A dry laugh escaped me, the sound of metal scraping metal. So the same people who drained me for years now wanted to paint me as a helpless victim of exploitation. The next morning I brought the petition straight to Mr. Carter's office. He sat quietly for a moment, fingers tapping the desk. "Linda, this is a serious escalation," he said, "but don't worry, I've been preparing for this. We'll prove it's a fraudulent filing." He opened a cabinet and pulled out everything we'd gathered: bank statements, receipts, money demand texts, and Dr. Moore's independent assessment. Stacked together they looked like a fortress. He studied the petition carefully. "Their weakness is fabricated evidence," he said. "I'll ask the court to verify the source of everything they've submitted. If even one piece is fake, their whole case collapses." I nodded, feeling something rise inside me, not fear but determination. This time I wasn't just defending myself. I was fighting back. When the court sent over their file for review, Mr. Carter spotted it almost immediately. A medical certificate signed by a psychiatrist named Dr. Kramer, claiming I had early memory decline and needed long-term monitoring. He checked the medical database. The man had retired 3 years ago. The signature was clearly forged. I went cold, staring at the page. "They forged medical records," I whispered. "Exactly," Mr. Carter said firmly. "That's our strike point. Submitting forged documents to court is a serious crime. Once we prove it, they won't just lose, they'll face consequences." From that moment I threw myself into organizing every shred of evidence. Every evening my dining table turned into a command center. I labeled folders: bank records, messages, forged documents, witness statements. Marjorie came over often to help. She'd read through each message patiently and remind me, "Think of it like cleaning out an old attic, Linda. The more dust you sweep away, the lighter you'll feel." One afternoon the phone rang. Mr. Carter's voice buzzed with excitement. "Linda, I just spoke directly with Dr. Kramer. He's willing to testify, to say under oath that the signature is fake. This is pivotal. Their mask is about to fall." My hand tightened around the phone. For the first time the grief and anger that had weighed on me for so long felt ready to surface. But now, in the light. While we waited for the hearing, Michael and Rachel didn't stop. They swung between pleading and threats. One message said, "Mom, if you drop this, we'll let everything go and be like before." Another read, "If you're stubborn, don't blame us when the whole family finds out about your madness." I didn't respond. I saved each one into a folder labeled manipulation tactics. Then came a call from an unknown number. A woman's voice said she was a legal staffer assisting my son and daughter-in-law. "We need to visit your home to assess your condition," she said. I laughed. "If you want to assess anything, speak to my attorney. I don't let anyone into my house unless I invite them." Then I hung up, steady, calm, unshaken. I knew the closer we got to court, the harder they'd push. Finally, the first hearing arrived. I wore a light gray suit, my silver hair pinned neatly, a touch of makeup for strength. In the mirror, I saw an older woman who was no longer prey. Mr. Carter met me there, and Marjorie came as my witness. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Michael and Rachel sitting across the aisle, faces tight. Rachel avoided my gaze. Michael glanced up, then dropped his eyes to the table. The hearing began with their attorney hammering on phrases like mental instability, irregular spending, asset protection. I sat still, listening quietly. Then they presented the medical certificate. Mr. Carter rose immediately, asking the judge to compare it with Dr. Kramer's official records. Moments later, the courtroom doors opened, and in walked Dr. Kramer, tall and white-haired, eyes sharp. Holding up the document, he said clearly, "This is not my signature. I have never met Mrs. Linda Whitman, nor have I written this report. I retired in 2020. Whoever used my name on this has committed forgery." The courtroom fell silent. Michael went pale. Rachel bowed her head, shoulders shaking. In that instant, the mask they'd built over months was ripped off in public. Mr. Carter kept going, presenting Dr. Moore's report confirming my full competence, the bank records showing the money that flowed to my son and his wife, and the threatening messages and letters. Each page landed like a hammer against a wall of lies. I sat there clutching my purse, tears running down my cheeks, not from pain but from release. The truth had finally stepped into the light. When the judge paused the hearing, she said more time was needed before the final decision, but the forged document had already shifted the balance. As I walked out of the courtroom, I heard people whispering, "Unbelievable. Her own son forged medical records to take his mother's assets." I drew a long breath and held my head high. For the first time in months, I stepped outside unafraid. Marjorie squeezed my hand. "See, Linda? Masks always fall. They can perform all they want, but the truth has its own voice." That night, back in my quiet home, I opened my notebook and wrote. Today they revealed their greed and lies before the law. I don't need to prove my love anymore, only the truth. I closed my notebook and stared at the ceiling, calm for the first time in months. The fight wasn't over, but I finally saw the truth clearly. I was no longer a woman fooled by sweet lies. I was Linda Whitman, and I'd found my strength. The final hearing came on a gray Monday morning. I woke early, dressed in the navy blazer Robert once gave me, and told myself I'd walk in not as a victim, but as a woman with dignity. Marjorie drove me to the courthouse, whispering, "Today you stand for all mothers who've been used by their own children." The courtroom was full. Neighbors, church members, even familiar faces from town. Across the aisle sat Michael and Rachel, both pale and tense. When the judge entered, the room went still. Their lawyer repeated the same story about mental instability and financial risk. Then Mr. Carter rose. "Your Honor, my client is completely competent. The plaintiffs forged documents to exploit her." He presented evidence, medical reports, messages, bank records. Dr. Moore testified that my mind was sharp. Then Dr. Kramer walked in holding the fake certificate. "This is not my signature. Whoever used my name committed forgery." The courtroom froze. Michael's face went white. Rachel stared at her lap. When the bank transfers appeared on the screen, $47,600, a hush fell over the room. Mr. Carter said, "If anyone here needs protection, it's Mrs. Whitman, a mother exploited by her own family." The judge denied the guardianship request on the spot and ordered an investigation into the forged documents. When the gavel struck, I felt something deep inside finally let go. Outside, Marjorie hugged me. "You did it, Linda. You stood tall." Mr. Carter smiled. "This isn't the end, but today we won." That night I wrote in my notebook, "Today I heard the voice of justice. It doesn't erase the loss, but it gives me faith that truth will always stand." Weeks later, the court's final ruling arrived. The petition was fully denied, and an inquiry into the forgery was launched. I'd won. But when Michael left the courtroom without looking back, my heart cracked open. A few days later, Rachel called. "You won. Congratulations. But don't expect to see Michael again." I said softly, "Tell him I'll always love my son. But I can't let him keep treating me like a bank." She hung up without a word. That night the house was painfully quiet. I sat by the lamp, staring at an old photo, our family at Christmas, Michael's arm around my shoulder. Tears slid down my cheeks. I'd won in court but lost what mattered most. After the trial I moved more slowly. Marjorie stopped by often with flowers or warm bread. She didn't need to say much, just being there filled the quiet. Mr. Carter called to remind me to rest. One morning as I swept the porch, I saw Emma at the end of the walkway clutching a teddy bear. Before I could speak, Rachel rushed up and pulled her away. Watching them disappear, I knew I'd lost more than a court case. I'd lost my son and the chance to be a grandmother. That night I wrote, "I won justice but lost part of my heart. The law can protect you but it can't restore love." Still, freedom flickered inside me. I was no longer afraid. At church, when asked what I wanted to pray for, I said, "Please keep Michael safe even if he no longer calls me Mom." Saying it aloud lifted something heavy from my chest. Weeks later, Marjorie arrived with the local paper. On page 3, elderly mother wins case against her son. I read it trembling. Calls started pouring in, reporters, women with stories like mine. One night an older voice cracked over the phone, telling me her son had taken her house. I cried with her and realized I couldn't stay silent. Marjorie smiled and said, "Linda, let's start a group. You can help others." And so we did. Mothers Who Won't Be Silent. We met in the church basement, just a handful of women at first. We shared stories, cried, and found strength in each other's voices. Mr. Carter volunteered to teach us about legal rights and elder protection. The group grew. We wrote letters, raised funds, and helped women take back control of their lives. One day after I spoke, a woman named Margaret stood and said, "Because of you, I refused to sign over my house. I finally chose myself." The room erupted in applause. I realized then, pain had become purpose. Life slowly filled with light again. I painted my walls pale blue, planted wild daisies, and added a porch swing under the maple tree. I took my first real trip. A week in New Orleans, listening to jazz, tasting powdered sugar on beignet, feeling alive again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.